All right, joining me now is, let's see who we got. Andy Woods, Dr. Andy Woods, and Rob Lindsted. Gentlemen, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Let's go right to the news today. If folks go to worldviewreport.com, I don't have my computer plugged in today, but if we go to worldviewreport.com today, folks, which is our aggregated news site, you are going to see a lot of news stories today that are really compelling, which is why I had to get Colonel John Mills on the phone as quick as I could. He joined us by phone there instead of television because, again, he was in transit and he graciously agreed to join us. But then I had to reach out quickly to the two doctors, Dr. Lindsted and Dr. Woods, because let me just share with you some of the headlines real quick, folks. Then we'll have these guys respond. Russian warship spotted in Saudi Arabian port. Russian warship spotted in Saudi Arabian port. Okay, here's another one. Turkey's Erdogan to Iran's Rassi. Muslim world must unite against Turkey. All right, let's stop right there because we're going to talk about these nations and take them as we go. Let's start with you, Dr. Lindsted. Can you hear me okay, Dr. Lindsted?
Yes, I can. Yeah, and actually, he urged the Muslim world to unite against Israel, as opposed to against Turkey. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have misspoke. I'm sorry. Yeah, I misspoke. Yeah. Turkey's Erdogan to Iran's Israel. Muslim world must unite against Israel. Excuse me, I misspoke. So yeah, let's speak about that. What does the Bible tell us about? What does the Bible tell us about Saudi Arabia and Turkey? I mean, we got a Russian warship spotted in a Saudi Arabian port. Now we've got Turkey saying, their leaders saying we got to unite. The Muslim world must unite against Israel. Let's stop right there before we go any further and have both of you comment on that. You first, Dr. Lindsted. What does the Bible say about Saudi Arabia in this coalition of Ezekiel 38 and 39, if anything?
Well, I see Iran spoken of as Persia, and we see a coalition coming from that area. I don't know that we can say Saudi Arabia in and of itself, but for sure Turkey is mentioned, but Russia comes with its hordes, so I would include them in the hordes. You know, until recently, Saudi Arabia, I'm gonna use the word carefully, has been our friend. But we did not act very friendly to them. We don't agree with a lot of things they do, but we can coexist. I'm going to tell you what I see, and Brother Andy might see something a little different. But I see a whole bunch of desperate leaders. I think Russia is desperate. The war is not going well in Ukraine, and so they've got to do something to encourage their own base, and they got to do something that works. So Israel's going to be the punching bag. China's almost the same way, and now I'm as shocked at the headline that came out of the European Union with Macron today, and he essentially said he's going to turn his back on the U.S. and he's going to look to China. You know what? When it all boils down, the United States does not have very many friends left. But there's another desperate person in the world, and that's the devil himself. You know, his time is limited, and so I think he loves stirring this up. And so we've gone through a busy weekend with Ramadan, Easter, and Passover, and so I'm not surprised that this was a very difficult weekend in Israel with over about 150 some missiles altogether were launched toward Israel in every direction, and Israel's still standing, and more missiles landed in Lebanon than in Israel. But it's a time when the whole world is in a mess, and you know what? I think your past guest just mentioned the southern border. We have every reason to be very worried about that. So we have our southern border. We have confusion with people in our country today. Look at the unrest. Look at the shootings. Wow, you know, this shows what happens when people don't have truth, and when they don't have a guideline and a worldview to live by that's going to sustain them through difficult times.
Dr. Woods, what are your thoughts on Turkey and particularly Saudi Arabia. I know Turkey's kind of clearly in that coalition of Ezekiel 38, but what do you make of Saudi Arabia's role in all this?
Well, there could be a reference to Saudi Arabia in Ezekiel verse 13. It talks about Shiva and Dedan, and a lot of people would locate those areas in Saudi Arabia. I mean, those are actually modern countries in Saudi Arabia, not countries, I should say, but actual cities or areas, in Saudi Arabia today. So the best I can tell, when this invasion happened, spearheaded by Russia, Iran, and Turkey, all three players that you're mentioning in your headlines, Shiba and Dedan, or Saudi Arabia, seemed to stage a lame protest. And I guess I've kind of looked at it as Saudi Arabia is sort of fitting into orbit because she's about to enter into one of the Abraham Accords, most likely with Israel, which are really not peace agreements, but they're agreements that are normalization agreements. In other words, Israel promises to open up trade, tourism, travel, and technology if Saudi Arabia will acknowledge Israel's existence. And so I actually see Saudi Arabia, through these Abraham Accords, profiting because of Israel. Maybe that's why she stages this lame protest. Now, this issue you raised here about the Russians in Saudi Arabia, that's sort of new to me. I'm going to have to sort of flesh that out as more information comes in.
Yeah, because that's the headline today, is that Russian warship spotted in Saudi Arabian port. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Saudi Arabia and Iran reestablished diplomatic ties, and Iran has become a significant military ally to Russia. A Russian warship named the Admiral Gorshakov was spotted in a port in Saudi Arabia this week, docking there for the first time since the reestablishment of diplomatic ties with Iran. The warship was returning from South Africa to Russia when it stopped at the Jeddah port for a 2-day break and refueling, Arab News reports. Isn't that interesting? The warship was returning from South Africa because, again, most people don't think about South Africa when we start talking about Iran and Russia and this coalition. But, of course, we know that South Africa is part of the BRICS banking system. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Of course, they're adding in Iran. They're adding in Saudi Arabia. They're going to add in, another country as well that just escaped my mind. But, I mean, this is really Guatemala, I think. This is really growing fast, this whole banking system that they're doing together. But there you go. I guess, Dr. Woods, there have been some who thought that at some point Saudi Arabia sits on the sideline and watches. I've heard Bible prophecy guys refer to that before. Saudi Arabia sitting on the sideline watching. Why would some say that?
Well, because of what I said a couple seconds ago, it's the belief that Shiba and Dedan, is Saudi Arabia. And so that's why she's kind of staging a lame protest when this invasion occurs. It's kind of interesting. She doesn't do much to stop the invasion, but she speaks up. And maybe the reason she doesn't do much to stop it is because of what you're talking about. Now we have the influence of Russia, in Saudi Arabia. Now you threw in, I think, South Africa. That brings to memory some other players in the coalition. Libya is going to be involved. The Sudan is going to be involved. And I just think this whole conversation is absolutely amazing. I mean, we could not have had this conversation a few decades ago. I mean, let's go back to pre-1948. There was no Israel to invade. And then as you keep going through the timeline and catching up to modern times, we knew Iran was going to become involved. You mentioned them. We knew Russia was going to become involved. You mentioned them. We knew Turkey was going to become involved. You mentioned them. We knew Saudi Arabia, although not invading, but staging a lame protest, is going to be involved. You just mentioned them. And then you just threw into the mix South Africa, which could encompass Sudan and Libya. You mentioned them. And I just think this conversation is amazing. I mean, every single player that we think of in the Gog Magog invasion, you just brought up within the last, couple of minutes. And I just want people to understand the season of time that we're living in. We couldn't have talked this way a few years ago, but now virtually every player that we think of in the coalition of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is now in play.
Indeed, it is in play, and that's why I wanted to get you guys on board today when I saw all these articles in one news day with all these nations mentioned. I want to have Dr. Lindsted respond to this when we come back. My response to all this is glory, because we may be going upward very quickly. Come up hither. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go. I think most of the folks in the audience are also ready to go. So here's where we look at what the world sees as doom and gloom, and we look at through the lens of the Bible and say, this is a great day, great news. We don't rejoice in evil or war, but we rejoice in the supernatural nature of the Bible. We'll be right back. Joining me are Dr. Andy Woods and Dr. Rob Lindsted. Andy Woods' website is andywoodsministries.org, andywoodsministries.org. Rob Lindsted, his website is BibleTIPnow.org, BibleTIPnow.org. Dr. Rob, these are, fascinating days for a news guy, fascinating days for a pastor and a minister. I think it's so interesting that you guys are where you're at. I'm where I'm at. Various people that we work with are where they are. BCY America is growing and expanding. We're going into New York right now, Manhattan. This signal is going into Manhattan. We are all over the country now with some very, very powerful terrestrial stations. Of course, we have Lindell TV, we have WVW TV, we have Brighteon, we have Band.video. I mean, our voice has gotten so big, 4 to 5 million now, regular viewers, and we know that for many ways. We know that for many reasons, and we know that in many ways as well. But the reality that we are where we are, reaching the audience we're reaching now, not 10 years ago, but now, at this time, we have more listening ears than ever before from the standpoint of what people thought was crazy or conspiratorial. They're now realizing this is happening. It was true all along. What we said was coming. Now we have the glorious story of the Bible to unfold, oftentimes to people who were once skeptics, admitted non-Christians, many of them listening, saying, I'm not a Christian, I don't go to church, I've never gone to church, or I was raised in the church, I left the faith, but I'm watching so many of your programs now, I'm returning to the faith, I'm now reading my Bible, I'm now watching the preaching of Dr. Woods, I consider him my pastor, and I watch his broadcast and his sermons. So many wonderful things are happening. And then we read the news today, what to the untrained eye looks like horrific news all over the globe, but we look at it through the lens of the Bible and we say, this is a remarkable thing, because these were nations that never had military alliances. These were not nations that worked together too many decades ago. Now they're in economic alliance, they're in military alliance, and they're all uniting in their hatred of America and Israel. It's what the Bible described. I don't know what some of these folks with this eschatology that some of the churches today have, what they're doing with all these verses. I guess they're ignoring them. I don't know if any of them will ever come to our side and admit that this has been the right eschatology all along. But this is just, to me, again, good news. It looks like bad news to the world. But to me, I read it through the scripture and I say, this is really good news. It's an exciting time.
Well, it is very exciting. And I'm sure like Dr. Wood, for years, we've been reading these passages and wondering how in the world is God going to do this? Well, He's doing it. I remember just a couple years ago, I was reading a book by a well-respected author, and it was before Israel became a nation. And this guy said, I'm going to go out on a limb, but he said, I think that Israel's got to come back as a nation. And 20 years later, Israel came back as a nation. But this guy had the faith to believe the Bible and to believe God. And so as you look at what's taking place, I remember a few years ago, I was actually in Russia, and I remember coming back and people said, okay, now what do you say about the fact that Russia is going to be a power in the end time? And I said, well, I guess I believe that they're going to come back again because we see them invading. I kind of divide these nations into aggressive and non-aggressive nations. Here's Russia. Russia might even be losing the war in Ukraine, but they're still aggressive. They're like a wounded bear. And here's Iran. Iran has a lot of problems internal, almost as many as we do in the United States, but they're still aggressive. Last week, I don't know how many, I think I counted at least 3 threats that they made against the existence of Israel. And yet the people are protesting, and it's a horrible condition there. Here's China. China is in miserable shape, really. But they're spending all their energy on, let's say, pestering Taiwan. And China would love nothing more than to be part of this. Someone just told me the evil axis. And so we see these 3 always aggressive, and now they're picking on Israel. But I think part of the confusion that we see here is the fact that the United States left a vacuum. I believe on another program, the 3 of us talked about the fact that we don't see the United States in Bible prophecy. And I received a couple emails this week, and one said, so what if the invasion of Rosh into Israel, described in Ezekiel 38 and 38, come before the rapture? Does that throw our eschatology off? No. I think it is going to be after the tribulation has started, because it says in chapter 38, verse 8, that Israel's dwelling in peace. They're not at peace today. So that's why I place it occurring then. But it could occur now. That's how things have fit together so rapidly. I mean, it's unbelievable how rapidly these things have come together. And then for Macron to say what he did today, as he tried to rally Europe, and always before he'd say France is pretty neutral, but look how they downgraded the United States. Look how they're downgrading Israel at the moment, and we're seeing the world turn against those that I'm going to say have been holding God high, and this is what we can expect. Why? Because the Bible said so. And so I believe you're right. This is a grand moment for those of us that believe the truth of God's word. And here's the other thing, Brannon. I watch a lot of news, probably more than I should, and I watch XYZ brand. I mean, I watch news that I agree with and news I don't agree with. But isn't it sad that there's no answers? There's lots of questions, and there's lots of people pointing out, here's what's wrong. But where's the answer? And that answer has got to come with an eternal God, because he has a plan. He knows the beginning and the end. And so you're right. We come this morning, we have hope. Why? Because we can trust the fact that God has a plan, and we're marching according to that plan. And actually the plan is coming into play much faster than most of us thought it would occur.
Yeah, it sure is. And here's another headline. Elimination of Israel. That's a direct quote. Elimination of Israel on the horizon. That's from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, more accurate name. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is soon. Elimination of Israel is on the horizon. Let me go to another headline. Let's see here. We got so many of them this morning. Here's another one. Iran kicks off multi-front Middle East war against Israel. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Iran starts multi-front Middle East war against Israel. The Islamic Republic's proxies and allies appear to have begun a multi-front conflict with Israel over the past week. A week of attacks on Israel, including rockets from Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria, represents the manifestation of an Iranian strategy to confront Israel with multiple threats on different fronts. Although different groups may be behind the attacks from those places, these groups are likely all linked to Iran. The groups involved include Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and others that may go by different or new names, but which are proxies of Tehran. Iran has long sought to bring its conflict with Israel to the Jewish state's borders. Its backing of Hezbollah and Hamas was key to that strategy over the decades. For instance, Tehran supplies Hamas with financial support, also helped to develop longer-range rockets and a larger arsenal, whereas Hamas rockets could once only travel a few kilometers. Now they can reach most parts of Israel. The Islamic Republic also supported Islamic Jihad, which is even more of an Iranian proxy than Hamas. The group not only has an arsenal thought to include thousands of rockets, but it has gunmen in the West Bank, and its leadership often resides in Damascus. Let's pick it up right there, Damascus. A lot of times we mention Damascus, Dr. Woods, and I don't know if you and Dr. Lindsted agree on this or not. That's fine if you don't. But a lot of times we mention Damascus, people are talking about the eventual, Isaiah 17, destruction of Damascus. What do you make? Is that a prophecy that's been fulfilled or yet to be fulfilled?
Well, my view is not as exciting as a lot of other folks. I have a tendency, I'm all in favor of, looking at prophecy and comparing it to the headlines. But there's no need for us to make prophecies say something that they're not saying. And when you study that Damascus prophecy, what it says there as you keep moving down, it says Israel will fade. And that's not an end times prophecy. An end times prophecy is something's going to happen and Israel's going to prosper through it. So that, and for a lot of other reasons, I have a tendency to follow the late Dr. John Walvoord and others who basically treated, Isaiah 17 as something that has already happened in Syria's past. But, at the same time, I still think Syria is very prophetically significant because it's on Israel's northern border. And who is there in Syria right now as we speak? Russia and Iran. So I'm very excited about the Syrian prophecies, or Syria's presence in Bible prophecy. I just don't really get there on the basis of Isaiah 17. Now, I won't sell many books.
Here's another.
But that's my view.
Here's another article. Hezbollah, Hamas, heads meet. Hezbollah, Hamas, heads meet. Promise further, quote, resistance, end quote, against Israel. Another headline. These are all just from the last couple of days, folks. Israel strikes Syria after rare rocket attack on Golan Heights. So it's heating up over there. It's heating up with Russia. It's heating up with China. It's heating up with Iran, with Syria, with Turkey. And then I look at that clown, Emmanuel Macron. What a clown. But he is definitely on my short list for the Antichrist. I mean, wow. Dr. Lindsted, we got a break coming up, but I'm not saying he is, but I'd put him on the short list. I mean, even his name, Emmanuel, God with us, right?
Well, he is on the short list. There's a couple other candidates because there's a lot of people that want that position.
Yeah, there's a lot of people wanting the position of being Antichrist. All right, welcome back. We're going to go to your phone calls here, 1-800-347-9829. First, Dr. Lindsted, do you have a comment you want to make about anything we've been talking here about?
Yeah. I think something that's interesting is how Israel's surrounded. Lebanon, but you got Hamas, and actually Lebanon almost apologized because they said, "Hey, this is not just Hezbollah. This is Hamas joining in." We know Hamas is fueled by Iran. So we have Iran on the east, we have Hezbollah and Lebanon, and this is really amazing, the surrounding coming out of Gaza. So they're completely surrounded, and it's so intense right now that Netanyahu has said he's glad that the former the defense minister Gallant has decided to stay. He said, we're in the middle of a war. That's how serious it is. In my time in Israel, in the last, I'm going to say, 35 years, this moment right now that we're talking about, maybe the closest we've been to a war invading Israel on all fronts. I mean, it complete surrounds. It's on the south in Gaza. It's on the east. It's on the north. I'm glad God's above. But really, this is a critical time. If you were in Israel right now, you'd be concerned because we're talking 150 missiles in the last 48 hours. And people making the statements like you just read from Iran, this is unbelievable, the threats that they're making.
And yet, We are one of the few outlets, VCY America, Crosstalk comes on right after us with Jim Schneider. We are one of the few outlets, guys, talking about this. One of the few talking about this from the biblical, ecological position we are. Most Christian radio is silent on these topics. They will not touch them. They don't want to talk about them. And that is really a sad commentary because it is so important that we understand what's happening right now. Let's go to John, line 4. John from Western Pennsylvania. John, thank you for calling in today, John.
Hi, Brannon. Thanks a lot. Yeah, my question is, I've been wondering about this for a while. I keep hearing these end-time prophecies talking about a revived Roman Empire. Where's the chapter and verse in the Bible that says that Rome is going to revive at the end times?
Yeah, we see this in Daniel 2, Daniel 7. Go ahead, Dr. Woods.
Well, in Daniel 2, you see the two legs of iron which followed Greece, and we think that's ancient Rome, Eastern and Western divisions. But the legs are quickly followed by the feet, and the feet mixed with iron and clay have 10 toes. And so based on that, we believe there's a gap, sort of in between the ankles and the feet. But by the time you get down to the feet, at that point, the church age is over. It kind of presents itself, because the feet are attached to the legs, which represent Rome, that it's some kind of continuation of ancient Rome. And so something arises out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome. But I'm of the persuasion that very rapidly it gets bigger than that, because when you cross-reference that with Daniel 7:23, it says that these 10 horns, which is a parallel with the 10 toes, will subdue the whole earth and tread it down. So something arises out of the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome, but quickly grows to worldwide proportions. And that becomes the vehicle that the Antichrist will use, ultimately to take dominion, over the whole earth. And we also know that the Antichrist has to come from Rome, because Daniel 9:26 gives us the nearest antecedent to the he of 27, which concerns the Antichrist, which is Titus of Rome. So Titus of Rome is sort of a prefigurement of the ultimate Antichrist who is to come. So that's how we connect this future empire somehow, some way, with the cultural inheritance of ancient Rome.
1-800-347-9829. We have a line open, 1-800-347-9829. Bill from Wisconsin, line 1. Bill, thank you for calling in today, Bill.
Hey, 70% of the world's meat is controlled by China, Smithfield. Basically, logistically, they can invade any country in the world. All they got to do is replace the meat with people. And Macron and the French are involved heavily in the shipment of the meat. They're also originators of the blockchain platform. Up here in northern Wisconsin, they just installed 6 license plate readers that soon will be able to be traced right back to your license, and they already have it implemented in Iowa and Utah.
Dr. Lindsted, you want to respond to that?
Well, the truth is, AI is making it possible for an Antichrist to take over. And even Elon Musk said, I worry, because if AI gets in the hands of the wrong people or the wrong country, it could be harm for the whole world. And so we're watching that take place, whether it's on processing food or banking or in every area of life. It's becoming a fact of life. And again, I think it's a condition that the Bible mentions could exist in the end time, and we're watching that take place.
Dale from Wisconsin, line 4. Dale, thanks for calling in today, Dale.
Hey, Brannon. Good to talk to you. Just wanted to make a comment. I don't know if you guys ever said this back when we withdrew from Afghanistan and we left the $80 billion worth of weapons there, that maybe if those weapons are going to get used against Israel, and whoever goes against Israel obviously is going to be punished by God. So maybe that's why America is not in Bible prophecy?
That's a good question. Good comment, Dale. Let's get a quick response, Dr. Woods, before we run out of time. Dr. Woods?
Well, I think the peoples of Central Asia are part of that coalition. And so when we pulled out, very fast of Afghanistan and left not only Americans there, but we left all that weaponry there, we actually helped set the stage for the Gog-Magog invasion, because now we arm that part of the world. So our own stupidity has God actually used to set the stage for Ezekiel 38 and 39.
AndyWoodsMinistries.com, AndyWoodsMinistries.com, and BibleTipNow.org, BibleTipNow.org. By the way, Dr. Lindsted has a lot of free downloads available for you at BibleTipNow.org. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. Cutting-edge programming here, folks, as we look at the issues of the day through the lens of the Bible and Bible prophecy. Hope you'll stay tuned.